Okay, I have a I have a cousin in California who is in charge of the the premature babies in a hospital in San Francisco, and I can just I haven't talked with him about it. I just saw this on TV this morning about these premature babies being evacuated from a hospital in Gaza, forced evacuation because Israel is attacking that hospital, because Israel claims that there was a command center and tunnels underneath, or even in the hospital, being used by Hamas in that hospital. So they've had to evacuate the preemies, and they've successfully evacuated a number of them to Egypt, where there's a whole group waiting for them. In the meantime, they know that a certain number of them died in the process, and the rest are just hanging on, and they have no idea how many, if any of those, will survive. And it just, so I'm talking about Gaza again. But why am I talking about Gaza again? Because this tragedy is unfolding in front of us in real time, right before our eyes. And the American people need to engage in this process and start talking out, speaking out about it. The Republicans are just rock solid supporting anything Israel does. Essentially, that's what Biden has done. Which brings me to my next contradiction. And first, I got to recap what I said yesterday, very briefly. But the Israeli position seems to be that it's okay for them to kill these innocent civilians, children, premature babies, because their objective is to go after Hamas, and Hamas is using those people as human shields. Yet there's nobody in Israel advocating, nor would there be anybody in Israel advocating, that it's okay to shoot the hostages that were taken by Hamas and being used as human shields in order to get to Hamas. Built-in contradiction, which really highlights what people around the world are saying, which is that the Netanyahu government couldn't care less about Palestinian lives. He only cares about Israeli lives, all of which are equally innocent. So I've got to thinking about another contradiction, and I'm going to try to be brief. But you have the Biden administration, and I must confess, I'm very disappointed in the administration, going hat in hand to Israel, saying, please, oh please, Mr. Netanyahu, abide by the rules of international rules of warfare. Please stop killing these civilians. Please at least pause long enough that they can get aid into the civilians in Gaza. Now they're talking about a possible pause so that Israel can get some of its hostages back. That's great. They should get these hostages back. But when they're talking about a pause for humanitarian aid of any significant amount into Gaza, they've pretty much been stiff-arming the administration. This is at a time when the administration is saying we desperately have an emergency need to give more weapons to the Israeli government. We desperately need billions of dollars in additional military weaponry to be sent to Israel. So they can do what with that military aid? What are they doing with the military that they have right now, that they have largely due to us? They're bombing and shelling and running tanks into Gaza and killing civilians. So why doesn't the administration, who's begging them to stop doing this, why doesn't the administration back off of the request for these billions of dollars in military equipment to Israel and say, look it, we're not asking you, we're telling you, stop it now. And we're not going to ask for, and we're not going to cut off every single nickel of military supplies aid to you until you do what we tell you to do, because without us, you can't survive. And how do we know? Because you have made this request for emergency aid in the billions, which means without it, you can't continue doing what you're doing. And so we're telling you, stop doing what you're doing, and then we'll talk about getting you some aid. Now, I have yet to hear anybody even discuss that, much less give a good explanation. So hopefully I'm reaching some of you. because this is just an intolerable and horrific situation. And I can tell you right now, what Israel is doing to these civilians in Gaza right now will go down in history as one of the great atrocities, ranking up there with Genghis Khan and Pol Pot, and what the Nazis did. Not on that scale, obviously. We're not talking about millions of people, but in terms of intensity, in terms of type, in terms of what Israel is, what the Benjamin, I don't want to even say Israel, what the Netanyahu government is doing to these civilians in Gaza, half of whom, or more than half of whom, are under the age of 18. These are children that they're bombing. And as far as Gaza is concerned, they're destroying Gaza City. What's supposed to happen to these people in the aftermath of this war that they're raging against a ragtag group of psychopaths? What's supposed to happen in the aftermath of that? Where are these people supposed to go live? There's nothing for them. They didn't have any place to live before all of this. Where are they going to go now? No one's asking that question. No one's talking about what's going to happen to these Palestinian civilians, children, parents who have lost their kids who have lost their parents. You think they're not going to hate the Israelis forever? This whole thing is a disaster, and it's a disaster created by the Netanyahu government. That's where the blame lies. Of course it lies with Hamas. But Hamas was a one-day thing by a ragtag of really psychopath. A lot of them young, young men in their 20s or teenagers, filled with hatred. And they're psychopaths. These people would be psychopaths no matter where they are. You take a psychopath, give him a gun and a cause, and say, hey, have at it, you're a hero. What do you think he's going to do? But the action by the psychopaths on that one day of their horror is no excuse for the Netanyahu government to go out there and kill babies.